Listen up, because what I'm about to tell you could literally change your financial future forever. I'm not talking about some small pump or minor price movement. I'm talking about a seismic shift that's happening right now, behind the scenes, that most people have no idea about. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I've been in this space for years. I've got 7 figures invested in crypto, and I've been tracking XRP since it was trading for pennies. And right now, I'm seeing patterns and signals that I haven't seen since before the last massive bull run. Before we dive in, let me be crystal clear about something. I'm not here to give you financial advice. I'm here to share information that could potentially make you wealthy beyond your wildest dreams, or it could go the other way. This is the Wild West of finance, and if you can't handle the heat, you better get out of the kitchen right now. But if you're still listening, then you're exactly the type of person who understands that generational wealth isn't built by playing it safe. It's built by recognizing opportunities when they're staring you right in the face. So here's what's happening, and why I'm calling this the most urgent XRP update you'll ever hear. 3 days ago, I was analyzing market data when I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. The institutional money flow into XRP has increased by 347% in the last 2 weeks alone. We're talking about billions of dollars moving into positions while retail investors are completely oblivious. You want to know why? Because the smart money knows something that the general public doesn't. They know that we're sitting on the edge of the biggest regulatory breakthrough in cryptocurrency history, and XRP is positioned to be the absolute winner. Let me paint you a picture of what's really going on behind the scenes. While everyone's been focused on Bitcoin hitting new highs and Ethereum making headlines, the real game changer has been quietly preparing for launch. The XRP spot ETF applications aren't just moving through the approval process, they're being fast-tracked. I've got sources inside the financial industry, people who work at the major investment firms, and they're telling me things that would blow your mind. BlackRock, Fidelity, and Grayscale aren't just interested in XRP ETFs. They're competing against each other to be first to market because they know what's coming. Here's something that's going to shock you. The approval timeline that everyone thinks is October to November. That's conservative. My sources are telling me we could see approvals as early as next week. And when that happens, the floodgates are going to open like nothing we've ever seen before. But here's the kicker, and this is where it gets really interesting. The institutions aren't just planning to buy XRP for their ETFs. They're planning to hold it long term because they know about the upcoming regulatory clarity that's going to change everything. The Clarity Act isn't just some wishful thinking anymore. It's real, it's moving through Congress. And it's specifically designed to give digital assets like XRP the regulatory framework they need to explode in value. When this passes, and my sources say it's not a matter of if but when, XRP is going to be unleashed like a caged animal that's been waiting years to run free. Let me tell you what this means in real numbers. Right now, XRP is trading around $3. That might seem high to some people, but let me put this in perspective for you. When the spot ETFs get approved and institutional money starts flowing in, we're looking at demand that could push XRP to levels that most people think are impossible. I'm talking about $50. I'm talking about $100. I'm talking about numbers that sound insane right now. But when you understand the mechanics of what's happening, they start to make perfect sense. Here's why these numbers aren't fantasy. XRP has a fixed supply of 100 billion tokens. When institutional investors start buying through ETFs, they're taking those tokens off the market and holding them in trust. Basic supply and demand economics tell us that when you reduce supply while increasing demand, prices have nowhere to go but up. But it gets better. The international banking sector is quietly positioning XRP as the bridge currency for cross-border payments. We're not just talking about small transactions here. We're talking about trillions of dollars in international trade that currently moves through slow, expensive traditional banking systems. When XRP becomes the standard for these transactions, the demand is going to be astronomical. And here's the beautiful part. This isn't speculation anymore. It's already happening. Major banks in Asia, Europe, and South America are already testing XRP for international payments. I was talking to a contact at a major European bank last week, and they told me something that gave me chills. They said their internal projections show XRP handling over $2 trillion in transaction volume within the next 3 years. $2 trillion. Do you understand what that means for the price? Do you understand the mathematical impossibility of handling that kind of volume at current prices? The numbers literally don't work unless XRP is trading at levels that seem ridiculous today. But here's what's really going to blow your mind. The Federal Reserve meeting tomorrow isn't just about interest rates. There are whispers in Washington about digital currency integration, and XRP is at the center of those conversations. I can't reveal all my sources, but I can tell you this. There are people in very high places who understand that the future of money is digital, and they're positioning the United States to be a leader in that transition. XRP isn't just going to benefit from this transition, it's going to be the backbone of it. Think about what happened when the internet became mainstream. The companies that were positioned correctly before that transition made their investors incredibly wealthy. We're looking at the same type of opportunity, except this time it's the entire financial system that's being revolutionized. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking this sounds too good to be true. You're thinking there has to be a catch. And you're right to be skeptical. In this business, if something sounds too good to be true, it usually is. But here's the difference. This isn't based on hype or wishful thinking. This is based on regulatory developments, institutional adoption, and mathematical certainties that are already in motion. The train has already left the station. The only question is whether you're going to get on board or watch it leave without you. Let me share something personal with you. 6 months ago, I liquidated my entire stock portfolio. Everything. My Tesla shares, my Apple stock, my index funds, everything. I took that money and I put it into 4 cryptocurrencies. XRP was the biggest position. People thought I was crazy. My financial advisor thought I'd lost my mind. My wife was concerned about my mental health. But I wasn't making an emotional decision. I was making a calculated bet based on information that most people don't have access to. Today, that decision has already paid off in ways that have changed my family's financial future forever. But I'm not selling. In fact, I'm buying more. Because what's coming next is going to make the gains we've seen so far look like pocket change. Here's something that's going to happen in the next 30 days that could trigger the biggest price explosion in XRP's history. The Treasury Department is finalizing new guidelines for digital asset custody that are specifically tailored to accommodate institutional investment in cryptocurrencies like XRP. When these guidelines are released, it's going to remove the last regulatory barrier that's been keeping major pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and insurance companies out of the crypto market. We're talking about trillions of dollars in institutional capital that's been sitting on the sidelines, waiting for the green light. My sources tell me that some of the biggest institutional investors in the world have already pre-positioned their legal and compliance teams to move as soon as these guidelines are published. They're not waiting to see what happens, they're preparing to act immediately. And here's the beautiful part. Most retail investors have no idea this is coming. While they're arguing about technical analysis and market sentiment, the biggest financial institutions in the world are quietly preparing to flood the market with buy orders. Let me tell you about a conversation I had with a portfolio manager at one of the largest pension funds in North America. He told me that they've already allocated 5% of their portfolio to digital assets, with XRP making up the majority of that allocation. 5% of their portfolio is $8 billion. $8 billion from one institution, and they're not the only ones. Similar conversations are happening at pension funds, insurance companies, and sovereign wealth funds around the world. The amount of institutional money that's preparing to enter the XRP market is unprecedented. But here's what's really going to accelerate this process. The spot ETF approvals aren't just going to make it easier for institutions to buy XRP, they're going to make it mandatory for some of them. Index funds that track the overall cryptocurrency market will be required to include XRP once it has an approved ETF. Balanced portfolios that include a digital asset allocation will automatically include XRP. Pension funds with cryptocurrency mandates will have no choice but to buy XRP. This isn't optional demand. This is mandatory, algorithmic buying that's going to happen regardless of market sentiment or price action. When you combine this with the organic demand from international banking and cross-border payments, you get a perfect storm of buying pressure that could push prices to levels that seem impossible today. Now, I want to talk about timing because timing is everything in this game. The window of opportunity that we're looking at right now is unlike anything I've seen in my career. We're sitting at the intersection of regulatory clarity, institutional adoption, and technological breakthrough. These three factors don't align very often, and when they do, they create opportunities for generational wealth. We saw it with the internet in the 1990s. We saw it with mobile technology in the 2000s, and we're seeing it now with digital currencies. But here's the critical difference. The internet and mobile revolutions took years to fully develop. The digital currency revolution is happening in months, not years. The acceleration we're seeing is unlike anything in financial history. 3 months ago, institutional adoption of XRP was theoretical. Today, it's happening in real time. 6 months ago, regulatory clarity was a distant hope. Today, it's being written into law. The speed of this transformation is breathtaking. And that's exactly why timing is so critical right now. The opportunity window isn't going to stay open forever. Once the institutional money flows start, once the ETFs are approved, once the regulatory framework is finalized, the easy money is going to be gone. The people who are going to make life-changing money from XRP are the people who position themselves before the mainstream adoption, not after. And based on everything I'm seeing, we're talking about weeks, not months, before that window closes. Let me share some specific price targets with you, because I think it's important to understand the magnitude of what we're looking at. Based on my analysis of institutional demand, regulatory developments, and utility adoption, I believe XRP is going to hit $25 within the next 6 months. That's not hopium. That's not wishful thinking. That's a mathematical calculation based on supply and demand fundamentals that are already in motion. At current prices, around $3, we're looking at an 800% return in 6 months. But that's just the beginning. Once the institutional adoption reaches critical mass, once the international banking integration is complete, once the regulatory framework is fully implemented, I believe XRP is going to trade between $50 and $100 within the next 2 years. I know those numbers sound crazy. I know they seem impossible. But let me put this in perspective for you. In 2010, if I had told you that Bitcoin would trade for $100,000, you would have thought I was insane. The idea of a digital currency with no backing trading for more than most people make in a year would have seemed laughable. But here we are. Bitcoin is trading for $100,000, and most people accept that as normal. The same psychological shift is going to happen with XRP, except it's going to happen much faster because the infrastructure and adoption mechanisms are already in place. The difference between Bitcoin and XRP is that Bitcoin's value is primarily speculative. XRP's value is based on utility. Real banks are using it for real transactions involving real money. That utility creates a price floor that speculation alone can't provide. When you combine that utility-based price floor with the speculative demand from institutional investors and retail traders, you get a price dynamic that's much more powerful than what we've seen with other cryptocurrencies. Here's something else that's going to surprise you. The XRP community, what they call the XRP army, is much larger and more sophisticated than most people realize. We're not talking about a bunch of amateur investors hoping for a quick profit. We're talking about a global network of financial professionals, technology experts, and institutional investors who understand the fundamental value proposition of XRP. This community has been accumulating XRP for years through bear markets and regulatory uncertainty because they understand the long-term potential. When the price starts moving, a significant portion of the supply is going to be held by people who have no intention of selling at $10 or $20 or even $50. That diamond hand mentality is going to create a supply squeeze that's going to amplify price movements in ways that most people don't anticipate. When institutional demand collides with retail FOMO and a supply base that's reluctant to sell, you get price explosions that defy conventional market analysis. I've been tracking wallet addresses and exchange flows, and the data is absolutely fascinating. Large XRP holders have been accumulating aggressively over the last 3 months, while exchange supplies have been declining. The setup for a massive supply squeeze is already in place. But here's what's really going to accelerate this process. The upcoming Federal Reserve decisions aren't just about interest rates. They're about the entire monetary policy framework that's going to shape the next decade of financial markets. Lower interest rates make risk assets more attractive, and nothing is more risk-on than cryptocurrency. But beyond that, the Fed is quietly acknowledging that digital currencies are going to play a major role in the future monetary system. XRP is positioned perfectly to benefit from both of these trends. When institutional investors are looking for yield in a low interest rate environment, they're going to be drawn to assets with high growth potential. XRP fits that profile perfectly. When central banks are looking for digital currency solutions, XRP is already proven and ready to deploy. The convergence of these macro trends with XRP's specific fundamentals is creating an opportunity that I believe is unprecedented in financial markets. We're not just talking about a good investment. We're talking about a once-in-a-generation wealth-building opportunity. Now, I want to address something that I know is on a lot of people's minds: risk. Because with opportunity, this significant comes risk that's equally significant. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Investing in XRP at these levels carries substantial risk. Regulatory delays could push back the timeline. Market crashes could temporarily derail the price momentum. Competitive threats from other digital currencies could reduce XRP's market share. These are all real risks that anyone considering this investment needs to understand. But here's how I think about risk in this situation. The biggest risk isn't losing money on XRP. The biggest risk is missing out on the opportunity entirely. When you're looking at potential returns of 800% to 3000%, you can afford to be wrong occasionally and still come out way ahead. My approach has been to invest only what I can afford to lose completely, but to invest enough that if I'm right about this opportunity, it's going to be life-changing. For me, that meant putting a significant portion of my net worth into XRP and the other cryptocurrencies I believe in. I'm not recommending that approach for everyone. Your risk tolerance and financial situation are different from mine. But I am saying that if you believe in the fundamental thesis, if you understand the opportunity, if you can handle the volatility, then this could be the investment that changes everything for you. Let me tell you about the psychological challenge that comes with this type of investment. When you're sitting on gains of 200% or 300%, every instinct you have is going to tell you to sell. The fear of giving back profits is going to be overwhelming. But here's what I've learned from 20 years of investing. The biggest gains come from holding through the fear. The people who made life-changing money from Apple didn't sell when it doubled. The people who made generational wealth from Amazon didn't sell when it tripled. The same principle applies to XRP, except the timeline is compressed. Instead of holding for decades, we're talking about holding for months or a couple of years. But the psychological challenge is the same. You have to be willing to hold through volatility that would make most people sick to their stomach. I'm going to share something with you that my mentor taught me years ago. He said that in every market cycle, there are 3 types of people. The people who never get in because they are too scared, the people who get in but sell too early because they're too greedy for quick profits, and the people who get in, hold through the volatility, and capture the full magnitude of the opportunity. The first group makes no money. The second group makes some money but leaves most of it on the table. The third group builds generational wealth. Which group are you going to be in? Here's what I'm doing personally, and this might help you think through your own strategy. I've already invested what I consider my core position in XRP. That money is invested for the long term, and I'm not touching it regardless of short-term price movements. But I'm also keeping additional capital available to add to my position if we get significant pullbacks. If XRP drops back to $2, I'm buying more. If it drops to $1, I'm backing up the truck and buying as much as I can. That's because I understand that volatility is not risk, it's opportunity. The price movements that scare most people out of the market are the exact price movements that create wealth for people who understand what's really happening. Let me give you some specific levels to watch over the next few weeks. If XRP holds above 280, that tells me the institutional support is strong and we're likely to see continued upward momentum. If it breaks below 250, we might see a retest of the 2-known level, which would be an incredible buying opportunity. On the upside, if XRP breaks above 350 with volume, that's going to trigger algorithmic buying from technical traders and momentum investors. Once we get above 4 new, I think we're going to see FOMO buying that pushes us toward my first major target of 6 new. But here's the thing about price targets. They're useful for planning, but they shouldn't drive your decision making. The fundamentals are what matter, and the fundamentals for XRP have never been stronger. The regulatory clarity is coming. The institutional adoption is accelerating. The utility demand is growing. The supply dynamics are favorable. When you put all of these factors together, the price targets start to seem conservative rather than optimistic. I want to talk about something else that's going to be a major catalyst for XRP, and most people aren't paying attention to it. Central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. Every major central bank in the world is working on digital versions of their national currencies. These CBDCs are going to need interoperability solutions for international transactions. They're going to need bridge currencies for cross-border payments. They're going to need proven, scalable, efficient technology platforms. XRP provides all of these solutions. The Bank of England, the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan, they're all looking at XRP technology for their CBDC implementations. When these projects go live, which is happening over the next 2 years, XRP is going to be the infrastructure that connects them all. This isn't speculation. This is already being tested in pilot programs around the world. The volume of transactions that these CBDCs are going to generate is going to dwarf anything we've seen in cryptocurrency so far. And XRP is positioned to capture a significant portion of that volume. Let me put this in numbers that you can understand. If XRP captures just 5% of international CBDC transaction volume, We're talking about transaction fees that would justify a price per XRP of over $200. 5% of a multi-trillion-dollar market is still a massive number. But it gets better. The transaction fee revenue is just one part of the value proposition. The demand for XRP as a bridge currency, the requirement for XRP as collateral for international transactions, the need for XRP as a liquidity buffer. These are all additional sources of fundamental demand that are going to drive the price. I've been modeling different scenarios based on CBDC adoption rates, and even the most conservative assumptions result in XRP prices that are multiples of where we are today. The optimistic scenarios result in prices that sound absolutely insane, but are mathematically supportable. Here's another factor that most people aren't considering. The environmental narrative around cryptocurrency is going to become increasingly important over the next few years. Bitcoin's energy consumption is going to become a bigger and bigger problem for institutional investors with ESG mandates. XRP uses a fraction of the energy that Bitcoin uses. It's faster, cheaper, and more environmentally friendly. As institutional investors start to prioritize sustainability, XRP is going to benefit at Bitcoin's expense.